Good morning to all across Canada and a warm welcome to those of you joining from the African continent this afternoon. I'm Gareth Bloor, President of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, and it is my great honor to welcome each of you to this esteemed occasion on free trade and the role of women and youth in realizing the world's largest free trade area by growth potential. It is our absolute privilege as the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business to welcome McGill University, our esteemed partner in delivering this event, and of course, the representatives of the governments of the Republic of Senegal and the Republic of Ghana, represented by Her Excellency Ambassador Viviane Bampasi and Mr. Malifo Awuto. Thank you for joining us. It is an absolute honor to have you here. And it is my great privilege now to proceed to the next opening address, and that is from the Chair of the Board of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. But before I do that, I would like to give special recognition to Dr. Nee Adi and his team, led by Professor Lebeau at McGill University, as well as to recognize the Fraser Institute's Fred McMahon, who is not only an alumnus of the university, but has led the charge globally on questions of economic freedom and free trade. Apologies in advance from our Chair of the Board, who has very kindly pre-recorded his remarks as Special Envoy to the African Continental Free Trade Area. He was just delayed on a flight between two destinations on the continent and very kindly took our time to share the following message with each of us. And no doubt he will join this call, I believe, momentarily. Mr. Sebastian Spiogabra has led as Chair of the Board of the Chamber for over 2 years, during which time the organization has grown into a full-time Pan-African and Pan-Canadian organization in reach. My apologies, it's been noted that not everyone is able to hear the audio. I'm going to restart that video again, and at worst we will have the remarks conveyed live. But apologies for that delay. We're going to go ahead now and reshare that audio. Mr. Sebastian Spiogabra, Chair of the Board of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business.
Portion of those, Ghana, Your Excellency, Mauto Alifu, Acting High Commissioner. Good morning, Your Excellency Viviane Bampasi, Ambassador of Senegal to Ghana, Your Excellency Mauto Alifu, Acting High Commissioner of the Republic of Ghana to Canada, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real great honor and a privilege to make some remarks at the start of this very important event, looking at it.
As there does appear to be a problem with that audio still, I'm going to relay the Chair's remarks just in brief. He's an Oscar that we can hopefully have that address a little later, but he sends his first and foremost warmest greetings to Mr. Mauto Alifu, the Acting High Commissioner, in recognition of the role of Ghana as the home to the African Continental Free Trade Area and the critical role of the Secretariat. He's also noted the importance and role of Senegal, and of course the leadership of Ambassador Viviane Bampasi. Senegal is also a member of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business. And the Chair has explained and conveyed that for Canada, the growth of Africa and the role of its young people provides a growth engine for dynamism for the global economy, and continued collaboration between Canada and African markets is of the utmost importance. And we will again offer the Chair that opportunity later in the program, time permitting, to offer some of those inputs. But thank you very much. And once again, apologies for that slight interruption caused by the audio issue. In the full version of this recording, which will be made available to all, that will certainly be present.
Good morning, Your Excellency Vivian Bampasi, Ambassador of Senegal to Ghana, Your Excellency Mauta Alifu, Acting High Commissioner of the Republic of Ghana to Canada, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real great honor and a privilege to make some remarks at the start of this very important event, looking at the intersection of education, women and the youth, and free trade and economic development in Africa. There is no doubt that if you go to any market, whether in Kampala or Dakar or Abidjan or Accra or Kinshasa or Brazzaville or any other part of Africa, Marrakesh, Casablanca, or in Cape Town, that women form the bedrock of the African economy, and who are the main commercial actors in Africa, and that the young people form a significant portion of those who contribute to the economic revitalization and who are contributing to the economic revitalization of Africa. And therefore, it's only appropriate that in all our discussions about the free trade, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the economic development of Africa, we really pause to look at the contributions of women and also the young people and the youth, because frankly, by 2050, Africa will have the largest youth population in the world. And therefore, the foundations we are laying now in terms of education and skills development and training would have a significant impact in the direction of Africa in the next few decades. So it's a real honor and a high privilege that we've brought so many people together today, so many embassies and ambassadors, and also educators from McGill University, a very prestigious university globally, one which has educated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of Africans who have gone back to contribute to the great development of the continent. So I really wish this event great success, and I hope and pray that our discussions will be fruitful and one which would help us all to move forward the idea of the revitalization of the African economy, a greater area of economic and freedom and economic growth, and one which also inures to the benefits of Canada, because frankly, when Canada looks abroad for new trading markets, it becomes quite obvious in a strategic sense that African markets presents probably the greatest opportunity for Canadian businesses and for the Canadian economy to grow in the next few years. So again, it's a real pleasure to join you this morning, and we wish the deliberations today great success. Again, thank you so much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure now to welcome our next speaker this morning. McGill University has led in leadership and research excellence, not only in Canada as a top-ranked institution and the top-ranked institution, but also globally. And for that reason, of course, we have many people to thank. But in this relationship, in addition to Dr. Adi, it's my great honor to welcome Professor Fabrice Lebeau, Deputy Provost for Student Life and Learning at McGill University. Welcome, Professor, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and the greetings to everybody, and especially to their excellencies, the Mauta Alifu and Vivian Bampasi. It's a great honor to be able to address you today, and maybe I will start by trying to put a bit of framework around our participation in these discussions as a global education entity. So you know McGill as a university that is known worldwide for the research, innovation, entrepreneurship that we have been investing in for the last 200 years as we're gearing towards our 200th anniversary here. We also have had long-term engagements in Africa, but I think what makes McGill a very global university is also the people who have been at McGill. We have a network of nearly 300,000 alumni living in over 185 countries, and I think this is one of McGill's greatest strengths when we're talking about collaborations and impact in particular in the issues we're talking about today, and the impact of the free trade agreements in Africa on youth and their development. So with nearly 300,000 alumni everywhere in the world, we have a community that is alive. Just to give you a sense, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a few broadcasts that we put together for alumni to give them a sense of what that pandemic was, and we basically used our experts in epidemiology, etc. We had 185,000 people tune in to these broadcasts. It gives you a sense of the reach we have across this incredible network of talented people who are all over the world. This is one of the main tools we have when we engage as an institution. It's that incredible network. We have been engaging with Africa over the years. An example is the creation of our African Studies program, which was established in 1969. It was the first of its kind in Canada, and it's really one of its aim is really to make sure that students acquire a good appreciation of the contributions of Africa to world culture and civilization, and so opening up to the members of our community to the continent. We do have a lot of work that is ongoing in Africa, and of course that's exemplified by some of our speakers today. But if we're focusing, for instance, on Ghana and Senegal, we do have quite a few international students coming from these two countries. This year we have 43 students coming from Ghana, 10 from Senegal. That ranks these two countries as 29th and 82nd in the list of 150 different countries of origin of our students. We do have active alumni groups in both countries, and their size, I think, is related to the number of students we typically see from these two countries coming to McGill. So we currently have nearly 90 active alumni in Ghana and nearly 20 active alumni in Senegal. At the level of the impact that McGill is trying to have in the areas of focus of this meeting, one of our big engagements in Africa has been our Mastercard Foundation program, in which we have been able to invest in over 100 scholars since 2013, and these Mastercard scholars are basically extremely talented, promising students coming from Africa to study at McGill. And one of the goals of this program is, of course, to make them leaders, the next generation of leaders in Africa. As part of this program, we now have what we call the Transitions Project, which is a way to make sure that these leaders that are being trained at McGill in our programs transition to meaningful, impactful employment and entrepreneurship that impacts Africa. So it's this notion of being able to really get the full potential out of these incredible young people that have been trained at McGill. And we don't want to just say, hey, good, you have a McGill degree, have fun in the world. We're definitely trying to make meaningful transitions with them. And that the kind of things we do is collaborate with businesses, government, civil society organizations in Africa to offer internship opportunities for our scholars and for our recent graduates from African countries, because they're also looking for experiences in African countries other than their own country of origin, typically, in line with greater mobility among African countries. That's the free trade portion that we're talking about today. We're trying to basically partner with as many organizations as we can on the continent to enable these meaningful transitions for our scholars and our students coming from different African countries. Another thing we're doing to try to also boost their transition into the work world and the entrepreneurial world is that we also have what we call the McGill Mastercard Foundation Transitions Fund. It's basically a fund where our scholars can apply through a competitive process to fund their entrepreneurial or employment creative projects that they may have up for 2 years since during their tenure at McGill or up to 2 years after graduation in partnership with organizations like businesses, government, civil society organizations in Africa that provide matching contributions. We also look at the organizations that provide matching contributions that are more international organizations like the United Nations, etc. So it's trying to make sure that our students who have these great ideas, these great projects, they can actually realize them and have the impact we're looking for in Africa. Let me conclude quickly to just put all this in perspective. And our perspective right now, it's 2021. McGill was founded in 1821, so it is our bicentennial year. We're looking at what's going to be happening in McGill's third century. And I have to say, building our partnerships in Africa for the kind of meaningful projects I just mentioned, this is really top of the list. One of the pillars of what we have been talking about during our bicentennial is what we call opportunities that open doors. And that is exactly what we're looking for here. It's making sure that with the reach we have, with the networks we have, with the projects we have on the ground that are research related, we open doors for the leaders of tomorrow. And so the youth of tomorrow in Africa is the kind of people we are definitely looking to help, and we're looking to learn from them too, because I have to say, having been involved in our Mastercard Foundation Scholars Program for the last 10 years, it's actually incredible the qualities that these young leaders have and what they bring to McGill while they're here and what they bring back to Africa when they go back. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to the discussions today.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. And once again, congratulations. That impact that has been felt across the continent, not only by Africans, but by Canadians, such as those who are joining us today, who have been alumni, I think is testament to every single point you've made in action. So from the board, the directors, and the members of the chamber, thank you so much for this historic working agreement that we enjoy. Now, Dr. Nee Adi is someone I was fortunate to meet, and I've been in touch with Nee for several years. And the culmination of those discussions between the Chamber and McGill is the event we have today and the program going forward. And for that reason, I'd like to commend Dr. Nee for his commitment to research on African matters and the intersection of trade and economic development within overall social well-being. Dr. Adi, it is an absolute privilege, and with special greetings from the chair of the board as well, I'd like to invite you for a few remarks and for the introductions of our government representatives at this high-level forum today. Dr. Adi.
Thank you very much, Gareth Bloor. Thanks very much, Your Excellencies, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure, as Gareth has indicated, to be involved, in such an event. The support of the Chamber, the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, has been particularly great in engaging with our young McGillians as we move forward. As Professor Lebeau has also pointed out, we very much look forward to the ability to build on this as McGill enters this century. At McGill, we have been very privileged that our Africa outreach, it's been informed by the priorities specified by our African partners, and those include the mission heads in Canada, the missions generally in Canada. So it is with great pleasure that I have the chance to introduce two of these mission heads who have been very supportive in how we develop our programming for impact, particularly for African youth. And that is part of the focus of the session today. The acting head of the Ghana High Commission, Mr. Mauto Alifo, and his team, they have been wonderful pillars of support over the years in various ways. And that might range from addressing the urgent needs of some of the African students, or to facilitating the kinds of interactions that we can have with government or with the African diplomatic corps, whether it's in Canada or in other countries. We are honored to have His Excellency Mr. Alifo speak today, as we are also honored to have Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Senegal, Viviane Bampassi, also speak. Of note, Her Excellency Bampassi is also the coordinator of the ambassadors and high commissioners of the Groupe de la Francophonie. She is also the president of the African Women Diplomatic Forum in Ottawa. I'll be very brief and allow them to share with us a few things. But again, let me express my great appreciation for all their support. And we look forward to building on the exchanges that we've had, the priorities that we collectively look to address. It is with pleasure that I ask that His Excellency, Mr. Alifo, speak, and then will be followed by Her Excellency, the Ambassador Viviane Bampassi. So thanks very much again to everyone. Your Excellency, Mr. Alifo, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Ni. Thank you for this honor and opportunity. Her Excellency, Ms. Viviane Bampassi, Ambassador of Senegal to Canada, Mrs. Pio Gabra, Chair, and Mr. Gareth Blow, President of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, Professor Fabrice Lebeau, and Dr. Ni Adi once again, both of the University of McGill University, distinguished academics and captains of industry, to the speaker slot for this unique event. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to extend our deep appreciation to the Embassy of Senegal, McGill University, and the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business for involving the Ghana High Commission from the planning stage to this present moment. I wish to assure you that, like all the other stakeholders involved in this is not just going to be a day's event, but a process of further engagements for the realization of strengthened Africa-Canada relations in the years ahead. The history of Africa and the quest for a functional regional economic integration cannot be written without recalling the landmark African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that came into effect on 1st January 2021. Indeed, the agreement was adopted and signed by 44 out of the 55 African Union member states in Kigali, Rwanda, in March 2018. By August 2020, 54 out of 55 African countries had signed the agreement, with as many as 30 nations ratifying and 28 depositing their instruments of ratification to prepare the ground for the launch of regional integration and situate Africa in its rightful place within the global political economy. This is the culmination of a long and arduous process. Earlier attempts could be traced to the Lagos Plan of Action and the Abuja Treaty of 1991. Needless to say, it has not been a smooth ride. Today, Africa stands at the threshold of a new dawn of hope and prosperity. This can be achieved through the implementation of a free trade area of a continent with more than 1.3 billion people, a spatial size of the USA, India, China, and parts of Europe put together. Africa is committed to the largest free trade area in the world, and based on demonstrated political will of the large number of participating countries. As a nation with a long track record of pursuing the political and economic liberation of Africa, Ghana is committed to the economic emancipation of Africa through the successful implementation of the AFCFTA agreement in all phases. The political will and commitment demonstrated in the establishment of AFCFTA grants every optimism and hope that this momentum will be sustained during the implementation phase. Yes, Africa means business. The dividends of this trade deal for increasing intra-African trade, in the words of the African Union, can contribute significantly to sustainable economic growth, employment generation, poverty reduction, inflow of foreign direct investment, industrial development, and better integration of the continent into the global economy. The success of the AFCFTA will depend not only on states, but also a range of civil society groups, institutions, investors, and organizations, including Africa's diaspora, women and the youth. What is it in it for them? That is our question for the day. In the World Bank's estimation, the AFCFTA has the potential to uplift 30 million people out of extreme poverty and to raise the income of 68 million others who live on less than $5 per day. Again, the AFCFTA, if implemented well, according to World Bank forecast, could boost income by 7%, or in other words, $450 billion, and a collateral benefit for women and the youth between now and 2035. Frustrations and obstacles to cross-border trade will gradually ease or be dismantled with the AFCFTA. Simplified border crossing measures and less harassment or seizure of goods at the borders. The majority of informal cross-border traders in Africa, up to 70%, are women and those under 25 years. AFCFTA would provide bigger and better unhindered markets for their legitimate businesses and services. It is imperative these women and youth to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the AFCFTA agreement. The world and Canada's role. I understand we are in the election cycle, so I must mind my words, but I will go straight to the point. An economically thriving and stable Africa can only contribute to global progress and prosperity. Africa's trade partners, including Canada, stand to gain from a well-integrated and harmonized African market. I would like to touch upon the following avenues for Canada's greater involvement in Africa's progress and development. A segment of Canadian citizens are of African descent. It is therefore pertinent for Canada at this juncture to support thriving business flows between Africa and Canada and elsewhere. A window of opportunity also exists for cooperation. This is well articulated in the AFCFTA Protocol on Trade in Goods and the Protocol on Trade in Services. And given Canada's rich experience in the negotiation and the implementation of mega pacts, such specialized and technical assistance could be shared with the AFCFTA Secretariat, African countries, and businesses operating between Canada and Africa. On the occasion of the handing over of the edifice for the Secretariat of AFCFTA in Accra, Ghana's President, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, declared that the economic integration of Africa will lay strong foundations for an Africa beyond aid. Admittedly, the approximate $1 trillion given to sub-Saharan countries as development aid by donors has not translated into the transformation most African countries desire. A new standard for development cooperation is required. it is more trade, less aid. Canada's development cooperation with Ghana and other African countries is considerable. This cannot be taken for granted, and much will be required in our development cooperation to promote trade. The way forward, as I see it, let's fight COVID-19 together. Let's talk about the debt crisis. I believe there should be a moratorium on servicing debt. Let's intensify global efforts to fight climate change. Let's bridge fiscal and digital divides. Let's provide access to finance to the youth and women so businesses can thrive. And above all, let's work together for peace and security in Africa and elsewhere in the world. My word of advice to the business community in Canada: every company or business person in any field would be in awe of the opportunities presented by the AFCFTA. The Canada-Africa Chamber of Business has offered itself as a leading chamber poised as an agent of engagement between Africa and Canada. As a member of the chamber, the Ghana High Commission has followed with pride the strong advocacy role played by the chamber in recent years in promoting Canada-Africa commerce. We urge the chamber to identify local chambers of business in Ghana, in Canada, and Africa to foster more business-to-business relationships. My word to the academic institutions, starting with McGill. Education and improved education systems would make possible the development of the required educated workforce today and the future. A platform was created during this pandemic for the exchange of ideas between McGill's Africa Outreach Unit and the West African Group of Ambassadors. We look forward to renewing such engagements for impact results. McGill alumni are out there in their numbers, contributing positively to nation building, including the governor of the Bank of Ghana. As we're ready to build again in a post-pandemic world, I strongly urge your reputable institution to be among the first from Canada to establish satellite campuses or form partnerships with local universities in the different regions of Africa to extend your trademark world-class education to the youth, especially girls. Given Africa is predominantly Francophone and Anglophone, Canada's bilingual traditions would make for McGill and other Canadian universities being institutions of choice in Africa. Education and teaching methods had undergone tremendous changes due to COVID-19. This is the opportune time for McGill and other institutions to make their presence and impact felt on a continent with the youngest people. Your collaboration with Mastercard Foundation, as my previous speakers said, already generating a positive impact on beneficiaries and communities. Your institution may also direct its research facilities and resources into the present and future phases of the AFCFTA. Part of the body of research findings, including business incubation programs, could serve as market and investment intelligence for policy makers, businesses in Africa and Canada to unlock the business potential between Canada and Africa. This is work in progress. This is the beginning of a journey towards true economic integration and the achievement of our development goals as envisioned in the AU's Agenda 2063. This is the Africa we want. I would like to conclude with the wise words of an illustrious daughter of Africa, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, a former finance minister of Nigeria and current Director General of the WTO, when she said, "Trade is a force for good, and if properly harnessed, can help lift millions out of poverty and bring shared prosperity." On that note, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thanks very much, Your Excellency. So we'll now hear from Her Excellency Viviane Bampassi.
Thank you, Dr. Alifo. Thank you, Dr. Adi. Monsieur Mawoutor Alifo, chargé d'affaires du Haut Commissariat du Ghana. Monsieur Sébastien Spiogarbra, président du Conseil de la Chambre de commerce Canada-Afrique. Monsieur Gareth Bloor, président de la Chambre de commerce Canada-Afrique. Professeur Fabrice Lebeau, recteur adjoint vie étudiante et apprentissage de l'Université McGill. Dr. Ni Adi, directeur associé Africa Outreach, Université McGill, chers panélistes et invités. C'est pour moi un honneur et une grande joie que de me joindre au Haut Commissariat du Ghana, à la Chambre de commerce Canada-Afrique, ainsi qu'à l'Université McGill, pour échanger sur le devenir et les perspectives du continent africain. J'aimerais remercier très sincèrement M. Alifo, chargé d'affaires du Haut Commissariat du Ghana, le Dr. Adi de l'Université McGill, ainsi que M. Spiogarbra et Gareth Bloor de la Chambre de commerce Canada-Afrique, qui sans relâche travaillent à consolider les ponts entre l'Afrique et le Canada. Mesdames et messieurs, nous le savons tous, l'Afrique, du fait de son histoire, de sa géographie et de multiples autres facteurs, fait face à des défis multiformes qui en ont fait au cours des dernières décennies, voire des siècles, l'une des régions du monde où les besoins en développement dans la plupart des secteurs sociaux et économiques sont les plus importants. Et pourtant, on s'accorde aussi tous à dire que le continent est l'un des plus riches par son potentiel en ressources naturelles, mais surtout par ses ressources humaines, et notamment par ses jeunes et ses femmes, qui constituent des leviers incontournables pour porter la croissance inclusive de nos économies. Pour rappel, il est à noter que 60% de la population africaine a moins de 25 ans, ce qui fait de l'Afrique le continent le plus jeune au monde. S'agissant des femmes, ce qu'il faut surtout garder à l'esprit, c'est bien leur incroyable capacité à entreprendre, même si elles doivent encore faire face à des obstacles très importants liés à l'éducation, à l'accès au financement, l'accès à la terre dans certaines régions, etc. La richesse première de l'Afrique est donc bien sa population et le marché potentiel qu'elle représente. Les projections actuelles ne laissent-elles pas entrevoir une croissance de notre population qui devrait passer de 1,3 milliard à 2,5 milliards d'habitants en 2050, soit 26% de la population mondiale en âge de travail. C'est assurément l'une des données fondamentales qui ont conduit nos leaders à adopter l'accord sur la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, qui est une formidable opportunité pour les acteurs économiques du continent, qui doivent d'abord interagir entre eux, faire affaire entre eux, porter et bénéficier de cet important marché africain. Conscient de la nécessité pour l'Afrique de compter d'abord sur elle-même, tout en consolidant nos partenariats avec les autres régions et autres pays du monde, tels que le Canada, le Sénégal s'est résolument engagé à faire de la ZLECAf un succès. C'est pour cela qu'une stratégie nationale pour la mise en œuvre de la ZLECAf a été adoptée par mon pays pour accompagner le secteur privé, acteur principal de cet accord. En cela d'ailleurs, la ZLECAf trouve une résonance particulière dans le plan Sénégal émergent, qui est aujourd'hui le cadre de référence des politiques publiques et qui fait du secteur privé le principal levier de la croissance. Il s'y ajoute que dans l'axe 2 du plan Sénégal émergent, un focus particulier est mis sur le renforcement du capital humain, avec comme cible spécifique les jeunes et les femmes. Nous trouvons là donc un lien particulier avec les objectifs généraux de la ZLECAf qui visent entre autres à promouvoir et à réaliser le développement socio-économique inclusif et durable, l'égalité de genre et la transformation structurelle des États parties. Le gouvernement du président Macky Sall a choisi de s'engager résolument dans le soutien et l'accompagnement des femmes afin qu'elles puissent jouer leur rôle et prendre leur place dans le développement du pays. Je voudrais ici rappeler que le Sénégal a adopté depuis 2005 une stratégie nationale pour l'équité et l'égalité de genre, la seconde phase 2015-2026 est actuellement en cours et a comme objectif premier d'assurer pleinement l'autonomie des femmes et des jeunes filles. Les divers instruments mis en place par l'État du Sénégal pour soutenir l'activité économique des femmes vont, il est sûr, leur permettre de mieux saisir les opportunités qu'offre la ZLECAf, même s'il y a encore un fort travail d'appropriation à réaliser pour vulgariser davantage l'accord auprès de la femme, de la cible femme. Je voudrais parmi ces instruments citer le programme d'appui à l'entrepreneuriat féminin Jigéen Ñi Tamit, qui veut dire en langue wolof les femmes aussi, qui vise à améliorer la croissance des entreprises de transformation agroalimentaire féminine, notamment par le renforcement des capacités managériales et techniques des entreprises dirigées par les femmes. Je voudrais aussi saluer l'organisation par l'Union africaine, la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, ONU Femmes, d'une session de coaching pour des jeunes femmes entrepreneurs en 2020. Je pense que c'est là de telles initiatives qui vont nous permettre qu'il faut démultiplier, parce que ce sont ces initiatives qui vont permettre aux femmes de mieux s'approprier les opportunités qu'offre la ZLECAf. Il y a aussi, je le pense, lorsqu'on parle de la relation Afrique-Canada, il y a là un champ à développer pour le Canada qui a aujourd'hui une politique d'aide internationale féministe. Je voudrais également, parlant du secteur privé, rappeler que le secteur privé dans toutes les économies africaines aujourd'hui est un acteur incontournable et la ZLECAf en fait l'instrument majeur de mise en œuvre de cette intégration. Et on pense qu'aujourd'hui, que c'est une opportunité pour le Canada de renforcer la dynamique d'entrepreneuriat économique, commercial entre le Canada et l'Afrique. Je voudrais rappeler d'ailleurs que nous avons organisé au mois de février dernier un symposium co-organisé par le Canada, le Sénégal et l'Éthiopie sur l'économie verte. C'est, je pense, c'est là un premier pas qui a suivi le voyage du Premier ministre Trudeau l'année dernière en Afrique et qu'il faut consolider, aller faire plus d'économies entre l'Afrique et le Canada, ce qui est tout à fait possible compte tenu des énormes opportunités et potentialités qu'il y a en Afrique aujourd'hui. Avec les femmes, il faut également les garder à l'esprit les jeunes. Ces jeunes, du fait de leur dynamisme et de leur potentiel de créativité, doivent aussi être particulièrement ciblés pour porter la ZLECAf. Ils représentent à la fois une force sur laquelle il faut compter, mais aussi un véritable défi pour tous nos pays, tant en matière d'éducation, de formation, que d'accès à un emploi décent et pérenne. En permettant à l'économie de se diversifier par une industrialisation accélérée et aux entreprises privées de mieux se projeter sur le continent et au-delà, l'accord de libre-échange est pour les pays africains l'occasion de répondre adéquatement aux défis du sous-emploi des jeunes. Le Sénégal, pour sa part, vient d'adopter un important programme d'urgence pour l'emploi et l'insertion socio-économique des jeunes qui devrait mobiliser 150 milliards de francs CFA pour l'année 2020, 100 milliards en 2022 et 100 milliards en 2023, afin d'accompagner les jeunes dans leur initiative entrepreneuriale tout en agissant sur l'écosystème de la formation et de l'apprentissage. L'éducation est donc le principal instrument à mettre en œuvre pour valoriser ce potentiel jeunesse. Et des universités comme McGill peuvent y contribuer en diversifiant les partenariats pour répondre aux besoins de formation de nos économies. Et je voudrais là particulièrement saluer et dire au professeur Lebeau que j'ai bien écouté son speech et saluer justement les initiatives qui sont prises pour accompagner le retour de nos jeunes. La principale richesse de l'Afrique, c'est sa jeunesse, c'est sa population. Il est important qu'elle soit formée, mais il est important également qu'au bout du processus de formation, que cette jeunesse puisse servir le continent. Et cette initiative que vous avez prise d'accompagner par un programme de transition ces jeunes à aller servir leur pays, je crois que ce sont de telles initiatives qu'il faut démultiplier à l'avenir pour que ce potentiel jeunesse puisse effectivement servir le continent et participer à la croissance et au développement du continent. Je pense que nous allons, tout au long de cette discussion, revenir sur ces capacités, sur cette possibilité, sur ces opportunités. Et j'ai vraiment hâte d'entendre les échanges qu'il y aura entre les différents alumni et qui vont nous permettre de voir comment tracer davantage ce sillon, comment pour continuer le travail, le partenariat entre l'Université McGill, entre le Canada et l'Afrique pour que nous puissions tous aller ensemble de l'avant. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Vivienne Bampasi. Thank you so much to Acting High Commissioner, Mr. Mauto Olifo, for those remarks from your respective governments and for the leadership of each of your countries on this historic free trade agreement. It is also my great pleasure as we move into the rest of the program to also acknowledge the presence of other high-level government representatives in addition to the private sector. His Excellency Adesina Sekun of the High Commission of Nigeria, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, from the High Commission of Rwanda, His Excellency Prosper Giro, Ambassador Ruth Chikwira of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and Mr. Stephen Lorette of the High Commission of Kenya to Canada. We also have with us former Global Affairs Director General for Africa, Paula Caldwell, in addition to Greg Goldhawk, former ambassador and senior trade leader, and Honorable Peter Braid, former Member of Parliament in the Government of Canada, alongside many other esteemed guests here today. It is my great pleasure as we move into the next portion of the program, keeping in mind the opportunity for dialogue, to thank you who have sent questions or comments thus far. Please do keep them coming in. And as we move into the McGill alumni portion, it is my great pleasure to welcome the first speaker in this portion of the program, Dr. Dorothy Okello, Dean of the School of Engineering at the College of Engineering, Design, Art and Technology at Makerere University. She will be followed by the second speaker before we move on to our youth panel. Dr. Okello, an absolute honor meeting you earlier today, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And I hope you can all hear me fine. Greetings from Kampala, Uganda. And I'm really very excited to be part of this event and to finally feel like I'm doing something for McGill because I really credit McGill as being a very instrumental part of my career. And I guess I can whisper it, if one can whisper in such a forum, that I still consider Montreal to be the best place to be in North America, winter inclusive. And that is, I think, says something for someone like me who comes from the very close to the equator. That said, McGill and the context in which we are discussing the collaboration between Canada and Africa, it really brings back a lot of what I went through 20 plus years ago while I was an engineering student at McGill. when I went over and on the Canadian scholarship, and I am always very, very grateful to the opportunities I've had, because I appreciate that scholarship comes from taxes, and no one likes to pay taxes, but thank you to the Canadian people that enabled me to get my studies done. But while there, number one, the access to information that I had, the access to the internet that I had, enabled me actually to be an active player in the women's movement back in my country. Because before coming out to Canada, I had been involved as someone who's in engineering. The internet was still coming up, so that can tell you, it was about 98. Internet was still coming up in our countries, and being an engineer was considered as the person who wouldn't fear the computer. So coming into Canada, I had to find ways to continue to support the women network back home. But now, the access to information, the strong women's movement that I also found in Canada allowed me actually in 2000 to found what still runs up to today, which is the Women of Uganda Network. And I share this as an example of what we can do, even at a very small level. And so for me, it's really an interesting reflection that, 20 years later, we are now 2021. I'm now back in an event associated with McGill, where we are discussing how government, how academic institutions can partner in advancing investment in research and entrepreneurship for Africa's youth and women. And this is important because right now, and I've stayed in academia, and so I engage very much with the youth. And of course, I have remained very strong in the women's movement. So speaking to the African Continental Free Trade Area, and according to World Bank study that I looked at, this has the potential to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty, right, in Africa. And when we break down those numbers, the bulk of those numbers are going to represent women and youth. And so what we're starting off here, what we're looking at here is particularly critical. The other aspect that I want to bring into this discussion as we talk is the disruption that has been brought about by COVID-19, right? A global pandemic. And what this has done is that, number one, it has shown us the need for local supplies, local manufacturing, and the need to embrace digital learning. Why? Because with the lockdown, right, everything that we were getting from out there, now we had to get from home, right? And then secondly, and this is felt in even with business and all, but speaking from academia, I mean, if we don't want to progress with our education and learning, then we do nothing. Otherwise, you must go online. And our university, we actually had a policy, okay, for online learning and education. That was way back, but we had never really gone full blast because of one challenge or another. Come 2020, and it was either we transition to digital life or we stop, okay? Now, these kind of issues actually mean that the discussion we are having now between the opportunities for collaboration between Canada and continent and also across the African continent itself, we can now see that this is very pertinent, okay? Because number one, we do need to scale up, right? We do need to scale up our local supplies, our local manufacturing on the continent, okay? And then that will lead to what are we going to be able to trade? Because now we shall have the element of trade. But having this in place is not enough. How are we going to actually further facilitate trade flows and business engagements across the continent? And this is where I bring in my experience with McGill. I mean, the exposure that I got while I was at McGill, and I got to travel also quite a bit. I went to Calgary, went to Vancouver, seeing that different experience and how things can happen, okay, in one place, and then comparing them with what we have in our own local context is very important. Because we have also initiatives that we are running already at the African level. For example, there's the initiative for the 50 million women speak, okay, by the African Development Bank, which is already trying and using a digital platform, already trying to promote trade and engagement across women businesses, women entrepreneurs across the African continent. What more could we be doing? Okay? what more could we be doing in this space? How do we inject in new perspectives from what happens out in Canada that we could then bring out and support and learn? And then also from the side of Canada, how do we learn in terms of how people have been able to make things work in Africa to innovate and even improve upon solutions that are pertinent to the Canadian population. So I look at it as a two-way process, not a one-way process. So in terms of industry and business, I think there's a lot of opportunity. We are talking about how do we scale up? How do we do things faster? How do we do, for example, 3D printing, manufacturing? There's a lot of expertise in Canada around this. How do we hone that, but in a localized version that is suitable and appropriate? And this is why we would have to have the partnerships. So we are not simply shipping solutions, but how can what we learn by trying to make products and tools and machining more robust, more affordable, how does that learning help actually improve the competitiveness for Canadian businesses? So it is a two-way partnership. When we look at the aspect of government, right? So it is one thing for us to say, yes, we have this agreement in place for the African Continental Free Trade Area, and that is done, and the number of countries have signed up for it, okay? What happens actually on the ground? Okay? Trade facilitation is a key barrier that must be addressed. And when we are speaking about women, when we are speaking about youth, this even becomes more pertinent, okay? I happened to be on there was a project I was looking at regional integration, regional business support for women, right? And we were looking at supporting women to come from the informal sector and be able to market their products, their cultural products, to the big platform. I can tell you, the documents which were being provided, okay, were almost 50 pages, right? And I'm like, okay, I know that we need to make sure we've done our due diligence, we've done all these things, okay? But really, with this 50-page document that I'm taking to the rural community, because remember, what we're looking at is that the African Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to bring out 30 million people from extreme poverty. So if you translate that into digital skills, education that they've had and everything, and then you're bringing a 50-page document, you can see the issue, right there. So how are we actually going to facilitate trade to happen so that these critical constituencies of women and youth that we are trying to be on to bring on board are not going to be locked out by the processes and practices that we put in place? How do we reduce the burden on businesses and traders to actually cross borders quickly and safely, all right? And also, as we have resolutions, as we have disputes across the border, and I know we cannot be so political here, but coming from Uganda, we have issues we need to solve with our neighbors. Okay, let me put it that way, right? How do we do this in a really quick way? Okay, so that for me who's checking my baskets over, or look at it in any other way, my agricultural produce, which has been value added, and therefore I need my 3D printing to get some new devices so that I can improve on the, I can address the time shortage, I can address the labor shortage and make people more productive for the same time that they were using even before. So how do we have speedy resolutions to this? And how does Canada and the experiences that you've had and the very feminist approach that the Canadian government has taken, okay? How do we leverage all that to actually support policies and practices in our countries so that we make this free trade area a reality right down to the grassroots and even reaching the millions of people that we expect to lift out of poverty and everyone above them, all right? Then down to academic institutions and this is of course my home ground and where I play, all right? How do we, number one, further the collaboration between, first of all, us across Africa, And I'm happy to report there are a number of initiatives across the African continent that are trying to get us as universities to work closer and closer together, to come up with innovations that take really into account and allow us to work with the communities on the ground, so that we come up with solutions that are appropriate to address the resilience of our communities. But beyond that, and even looking up to where we're the level of Canada and Africa, how do we leverage that? How does myself, who has been in McGill, and the team at McGill, how do we start from there? For example, and I know that people here from other universities and opportunities, but how leverage that alumni network, okay, in terms of research and entrepreneurship opportunities, seeking to address the research and innovation ecosystem, okay, so that as we nurture our students through the system, okay, the kind of projects that they are doing. So for example, in engineering, they have to do a capstone project every year, all right? So how do we transform those capstone projects to be more than a requirement for the degree, but actually supporting, right, a vibrant trading ecosystem across the continent? Already there are initiatives, and I'm glad this has been mentioned even by the speakers ahead of me, the Mastercard Foundation, all right? So we have a Mastercard Foundation program in McGill. We also have one at Messier and in other institutions. How do we actually piggyback on those kind of opportunities to, even starting effective tomorrow, see what more we can be doing, okay, to support and nurture the youth, whether in our formal education systems, because one of the beauties about the Mastercard Foundation is that we really encourage our scholars to look at the communities that they come from as the starting point for their innovation journey, okay? How do we address the problems within our communities? And then how do we step up from the communities to our nations and then to the continent at large? How do we nurture innovation ecosystems that leverage the diversity across Africa and then bring in the richness that you have in Canada? And I think one of the beauties about Canada and the linkage that we would have between Canada and Africa is that Canada is bilingual. And I'm sorry that the French that I took so much effort to learn while I was in McGill has really fallen down. I think I stop after bonjour, and I always try to listen to French whenever I can, but it's gone down. But what that means is that we can partner very easily with Canada, because talk about the Anglophone, we got it. Talk about the Francophone. So already language and being able to understand each other and be able to connect with each other, that is a barrier we have addressed. So what I'm hoping actually is that this is a beginning for us to strengthen the collaborations. And I'm glad that it's being driven by the business, the Canada-Africa Business Forum, because that is what will now help us even with issues of sustainability, okay? So that we are all moving together in one force, okay? Looking to enhance the trade, by way of trade, increasing the incomes of our populations, increasing their sustainability, increasing their quality of life. And through that, we are supporting from the academia part, we are nurturing, we are grooming our youth, okay, to really be leaders, to be in terms of developing of our countries, understanding that they have a role to play, okay, in what we can do, and using what we have locally in our countries. As I said before, COVID has showed us that whatever we may think of our countries, we need to act local, because at the certain point when everything got locked down, we had to actually look at what we have around us and make do with that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okello. And as we move to our youth panel, we have, of course, one more McGill alumni, and that is none other than Miss Marie Chantal Messier, who joins us from Nestlé. Thank you so much for joining the panel today, noting your important role at the company as Assistant Vice President and Global Head of Food and Industry Affairs at Nestlé. Welcome to you.
Merci, merci beaucoup. D'abord, je pense que je veux dire un grand merci aux organisateurs et particulièrement à Dr. Ni pour l'invitation. D'abord, je voudrais réitérer les mots de gratitude de Dr. Okello. C'est vraiment un honneur pour moi en tant que diplômée de McGill et de Canadienne de participer à cet événement. J'avoue que j'ai beaucoup de gratitude pour l'excellente formation que McGill m'a fournie, la réputation, la rigueur de travail que j'ai appris à McGill m'ont vraiment aidé tout au long de ma carrière et m'ont permis d'avoir le poste que j'ai aujourd'hui. C'est aussi pour moi un grand plaisir de parler des opportunités pour l'Afrique parce que, comme je dis souvent, je connais mieux l'Afrique que mon propre pays. Je ne suis pas toujours sûre de quel côté je suis le plus fière. J'ai commencé à travailler en Afrique en 1998 et j'ai travaillé dans plusieurs pays et d'ailleurs comme volontaire canadienne d'ailleurs. Et puis je suis de retour depuis le mois de mai après avoir passé 4 merveilleuses années au Ghana au sein de Nestlé Central and West Africa. Et donc, je considère en fait l'Afrique comme ma deuxième maison. Donc, vraiment, c'est un grand plaisir et un honneur pour moi de parler avec vous aujourd'hui. I'm going to switch to English because I think that might be easier for some people, some of you. I think I'm going to talk about three things today. One is, why is the African Free Trade Agreement so important to Nestlé, and why is it so important to Africa? I was also asked to talk about some of the partnerships that we have to bring to life the African Free Trade Agreement and the development of Africa, the growth of Africa. And then maybe, if I may, a few tips for all the young and hopeful Africans, students out there based on my experience in Africa as to how to make it and how you can contribute to a bright future for Africa. So why is the African Free Trade Agreement so important for Nestlé? I'd like to repeat the words of Professor Lebeau. For me, the AFTA is very important because it provides an opportunity to open doors. And I would really like to emphasize that it opens doors. It doesn't close them. It's an opportunity. For Nestlé, as the largest food and beverage company in Central and West Africa and actually across Africa, and a recognized top employer, we've been recognized as top employer in both of our region and in Africa. There are numerous points of convergence between the African Free Trade Agreement and what Nestlé wants to achieve in terms of business objective on the continent. Of course, what AFTA aims to do is basically the same that Nestlé aims to do, which is to deliver sustainable growth and particularly business growth, create jobs. And the way that Nestlé wants to do that, and this is where I've graduated out of the School of Dietetics and Nutrition, so you will see that across what I talk and why I ended up working for Nestlé is the mission of delivering affordable and accessible nutrition to all in the continent of Africa. And why is nutrition so important? Why will I talk about it throughout? Is not only my passion, but it's also because it is the basis and the foundation of a solid workforce, a productive workforce, and enables children to learn, enables students to learn. So this is why I see a lot of also convergence between the work that I do, the formation that I received at McGill, and the growth of Africa. The other thing that why there is so much convergence between what Nestlé's business objective and being a force for good in Africa is that we also need the right workforce and skilled workforce. We employ more than 5,200 people just in Central and West Africa, probably more or less around the same number in South Africa. And we work with tens of thousands of farmers, suppliers, distributors. So for us, it's very important to attract top African talent, including those of you on the line today. I would strongly encourage you to consider going back and because there are opportunities for you, companies like Nestlé are looking for people like you. And the other thing is that not only are we looking for top talents like you, but we're investing in people. We're investing in people in new areas. We're investing in business, in sales, in digital. Dr. Okello talked a lot about the importance of digital. I have to say that coming back from Ghana, I wish I had a larger pool of people highly skilled in digital, and then in supply chain and research and development. Actually, we have our research and development pole for the whole of Africa based out of Côte d'Ivoire, and we're very proud to have most of our colleagues from Africa, and this is also why we have set up numerous partnerships with academic institutions on the continent. One of which I'm super happy of is in University of Ghana to provide training opportunities to University of Ghana students and graduates. And so one of the other things that, because we're talking about women and the role of women, personally, this is something that is very dear to my heart, the role of women, women in business, women in the workforce, and how can we support them. And this is why we have targeted programs for equity in Nestlé. Right now, we have globally an objective of having 40% of our senior managers as women. And in Africa, actually, we're in some of our countries in Africa, such as Burkina Faso, we already have parity in our senior managers in the country. And we're very close to reaching that in other countries in West Africa. So it's very important that we have a strong pool of applicants, but we also need not only a strong pool of applicants, but the pool of applicants need to know how to sell themselves to companies. And I will say that this is very important for all the students out there. It's not just great to have a good, solid training, but you also need to be able to sell your skills once you graduate. And what we've noticed is that in Africa, sometimes this is a bit challenging. How do you access job offers? How do you know that there are positions out there? How do you present a good resume, a compelling resume? How do you nail that first interview so that you are going on to the second and third one? And those are very important. What we realize is that a lot of African young people do not have these skills when they get out of universities. And this is why actually 2 years ago, just before COVID, Nestlé initiated with a number of other companies across Africa, the Sub-Saharan Africa Alliance for Youth. Why do we do that? Because we believe that investing in youth is vital for thriving, resilient communities. And for us, because at Nestlé, we have this creating shared value. So investing what is good for the community, but also what's good for the business. And so if we have thriving, resilient communities, if we have a pool of very competent people, then it helps build our business too. So this is why we launched the Alliance for Youth in Sub-Saharan Africa. Why is it important? Because it keeps our company competitive. It gives us an edge. So we want the best. The farmers who grow our crop, particularly we're talking a lot about climate change. It's important that they have state-of-the-art skills to grow crops, because actually we, as a company, we source 70% of all our raw material in Central and West Africa. So it's important that climate change doesn't disrupt that. Actually, our goal is to reach for 100% of raw material sourced in Africa. So we need farmers, young farmers that know how to how to grow crops and how to mitigate the effects of climate change. We need entrepreneurs, we need distributors who will be able to get the food that we produce in the region to the most remote areas and to get it at an affordable price to the people who need it the most. So this is why it's important for us to do that. And this is why not just us at Nestle, but the 6 other companies that have joined the alliance, such as ABB, AdCorp, Nielsen, Publicis, Microsoft, and we have numerous other countries in the companies in the 4 countries that we have launched the alliance so far. So if you're ever interested in joining, and I will put the link in the chat room, we have an alliance in South Africa, we have an alliance in Angola, we have an alliance in Nigeria that we actually launched this week, and we have one in Cote d'Ivoire. Ghana is coming up because I know that my Ghanaian friends will say, hey, how about us? It's coming up very soon. So keep posted on that. I will put the link. Do reach out, do look at the site. There's a lot of resources to help you land that best job, land that good job that you hope for in Africa. I think what I might want to look at is, why are we doing these partnerships in Africa, and why for a company of our size do we think that this is important? For me, I'm a very strong believer in the power of partnerships, such as the one for the Alliance for Youth in Africa, because it really allows to bring together the strength of each parties to tackle society's problems. So whether it is youth employment, women empowerment, and overcoming malnutrition. So on women empowerment, what we have done is we focused a lot on, we realized that we had difficulties recruiting women. And at first we thought it was a bias that we had in our recruitment process. What we realized is that at the final interview, it wasn't a problem. The problem was the number of women applicants. And so we started targeting better where women's groups are, to let them know that they could apply. We also set up rooms so that they can bring their children on our work site, particularly in factories. What we realized is that we had a great disparity between the women on our assembly line and the women and men. And what we realized is that they needed breastfeeding room. They needed a place where they could safely bring their children and keep an eye on them. They needed slightly different work hours. So this is what we have done to empower women in the workforce. And what we really want, what we really hope is that with working with the different companies and working with governments, that we can encourage more companies and more organizations to follow suit. Another thing that Nestle has done to get more women into the workforce is to extend the maternity leave. So in Canada, we're very, very lucky to have a long maternity leave, but in several countries in the world, this is not possible. And so we've extended the maternity leave up to 6 months, and women can even take extra time if they want to, so that they can exclusively breastfeed their children up to 6 months, and also to allow for them to bond with their children. And it's not just women, actually. We've extended it to any primary caregiver of the family, whether you adopt, whether you give birth. And so this is important to build this equity and bring more women into the workforce. I think what I've learned over the years that I've done partnerships throughout Africa is that there are some key principles that must be in place for the success of a partnership, such as the Alliance for Youth for Africa. First is you need a very clear common goal and objective. If you just say, oh, youth employment, it's not very clear. Like, how many youth do you want to get out there, and how are you going to do that? A very clear picture of success. So that's quite important. A rigorous due diligence process, and of course recognizing that private sector, public sector, and academia work in different time zones. So recognizing the differences, but also embracing them. And last but not least is definitely celebrating small successes regularly to see where we're going through and really achieve the greater goal that we have fixed. So in conclusion, what would be my main recommendations to you as a McGill alumni, as someone who has actually started her career in Africa and have had the great opportunity to have a very fulfilling career. For me, I love Africa, and one of the reasons why I love Africa is that sky is the limit in terms of opportunities. Often media says, oh, Africa is bad, and they send a bad picture. I don't have that picture of Africa. I think in Africa, if you have a good idea, you're a hard worker, you're willing to provide top service and top quality, the future is very bright for you. Sky is the limit. Youth and women are the lifeline of Africa. You are resourceful, you are innovative, you are skillful. Go for it, never doubt that. With an excellence mindset, you can bring positive change and contribute to a bright future in Africa. And when I say an excellence mindset, and I've said that, never lower your standards. This is doing a disservice for everyone. Aim for the best, no matter where you are, no matter who you are. And then for us, of course, looping it back to the African Free Trade Agreement, reducing barriers to trade, but also improving and harmonizing the standards of products across Africa will open markets, will open opportunities, and with those opportunities, will provide a great pathway to sustainable, profitable growth in Africa. So voila. Thank you, Dr. Ali.
Thank you very much. And we have 3 speakers ahead. We're going to be hearing from the youth, the 2 Chamber Fellows, and then concluding with Fred McMahon of the Fraser Institute. For those of you who've got the program in front of you, we'll then have an opportunity for networking. That will include Q&A through till 12 o'clock here in Toronto and Ottawa, at 6 p.m. Central African time. At this juncture, it's my great honor, and truly I say that, to welcome the next generation of leaders. We have joining us 2 Chamber Fellows, last year's inaugural fellow, Mr. Mune Mafusire, a McGill graduate student, and then we have Ms. Akinyi Aurelia, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and this year's 2021 Chamber Graduate Fellow on Free Trade. Without further ado, Mr. Mune Mafusire, the floor is yours, and thank you for your excellent contributions to the Canada-Africa trade agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bloor. I guess I'm going to start today by just acknowledging Your Excellency, Mrs. Bamsi, Ambassador of Senegal, Your Excellency, Mr. Alifu, Acting High Commissioner of the Republic of Ghana, Dina Kello, Deputy Provost Lebeau, and to all the distinguished guests today. I guess I'll also start by mentioning that I'm joining you from McGill University, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Ganiga-Haga, which has long served as a meeting site and exchange amongst Indigenous people. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose presence marks this territory on which people gather now. As noted in the concept note for this webinar, which is Securing Africa's Free Trade Future, and exploring the vital role of youth and women in the AFCFTA. It is important to note that the youth are given the platform to contribute to conversations in meaningful ways. While the rest of my statement will continue to focus on inclusion of women in trade, I just want to highlight the fact that youth are very important in terms of just driving the conversation in the most innovative sense. According to the UN, 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25 years old, and this makes us the youngest continent. What is concerning, though, is that 12 million youth enter the workforce with only 3 million formal jobs available. My aim here is not necessarily to cause alarm, but for us to consider the dialogue, for us to consider and dialogue about the untapped potential of tech and media savvy youth who have also the capacity to use their skills to change the fortunes of, for instance, the agriculture sector, as has been mentioned by the previous speaker, which is the biggest contributor actually in employment in Africa. We are also the generation, though, that thinks deeply about issues of inclusion, or rather the current state of non-inclusion when it comes to women and girls. Whilst we have all been quick to embrace the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area, it is important that we become champions of inclusive trade that aims to integrate and address issues that inhibit African youth and women's ability to trade or just fully participate in all economic activity. Among the many issues is the informal cross-border trade. And I think this has also been mentioned by the previous speaker. It was the Dean Okello. And the issues with informal cross-border trade is that it really exposes women and risks to their lives, and also stifles the scalability of some of the business and entrepreneurial ventures. This informality has resulted in serious socioeconomic consequences. From a social standpoint, much of the qualitative data has revealed issues related to just personal safety and a real issue, which is gender-based violence. In the SADC region alone, it is estimated that informal cross-border trade accounts for about 30 to 40% of total trade. Furthermore, women comprise an estimated 70% of the total informal cross-border trade in that region. While the definition of cross-border trade varies, it is commonly accepted that this includes business operations that go on without official export or import licenses. Simply put, such businesses operate under the radar of the state and are not recorded by the official statistics. From an economic standpoint, addressing issues of informal cross-border trade are integral to unleashing the full potential of the AFCFTA. Especially given the volume of informal cross-border trade across the SADC region, which alone is estimated to be upwards of $17 billion. Excuse my bias to use data from Southern Africa. I am Zimbabwean, but also would like to let everybody know that I'm still very much a card-carrying Pan-Africanist. I mentioned the tune of $17 billion to demonstrate the agency and impact women already have on the African continent. In essence, we should be seeking to support them, especially given the significant contributions to the economy. There's a substantial amount of empirical evidence, which I think most of us have now come across in one way or another, which is that women devote a significant amount of their earnings toward their children's education, health, and nutrition. And lots of the poverty data revealed has suggested that women-headed households perform better than their male counterparts. Now, the socioeconomic transformation will not be possible without the inclusion of women, and progress on this front remains threatened until we seriously pay attention to a progressive trade agenda within the context of the AFCFTA. And this will relate to issues such as ensuring that there's gender-sensitive trade policy at the center and the heart of this. As at the moment, actually, the former chairperson of the African Union's President Cyril Ramaphosa actually brought out a mandate last year in, I believe it was December, to the African Continental the Secretariat to consider the manner in which legal instruments can address issues of women's inclusion. And this is very much welcomed. My colleague Akinyi, who will be speaking after me, and who is the legal mind, will delve a bit deeper into the importance of this. Before concluding, I would like to mention that although the AFCFTA is inherently an African project with an African agenda, this does not prevent willing partners from supporting the implementation of this agreement. Canada can have a role to play, particularly in how it relates to the inclusive and progressive trade agenda. In 2017, of which I think Dean Okello mentioned, Canada released its Feminist International Assistance Policy as a new foreign policy position. Now, through deep and meaningful collaboration, Canada has an opportunity to engage with this African flagship project, which is the AFCFTA, in a more constructive manner, and again, in a more meaningful manner. As an awardee of the McGill Mastercard Foundation Transition Project, my colleagues and I will actually be working on a policy project or a policy report to address this very issue. We would also like to welcome willing partners who would like to connect and support our ongoing work on this front. And essentially, our key goal is really to ensure that the AFCFTA liberates the continent through this inclusive trading regime, and Canada's ability to leverage its feminist international assistance policy in this space will be vital. Whilst the AFCFTA is by no means a silver bullet, it does present a very unique opportunity for economic transformation on the continent. And I've said this a few times as well, that I'm very excited about this project, in particular because of the dynamics of the team, in which they seem like they are part of the younger demographic on the continent. So I think this can really turn the tide when we think about socioeconomic transformation on the continent. I would like to appreciate you all for your attention, and we'll leave the floor to Akinyi for her remarks on the legal perspective on women's inclusion. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Akinyi.
Thank you very much, Gareth. It's indeed an honor to be part of this distinguished panel, and I'm very grateful to be here today. And I'm here to talk about mainstreaming gender provisions in the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area. So to start us off, I'll first define what gender mainstreaming is, and then perhaps give us some advantages of mainstreaming gender provisions in an agreement that establishes a free trade area. And in conclusion, I will conclude then by stating how the African Continental Free Trade Area, the CAFTA agreement, is faring on so far in relation to gender mainstreaming. So gender mainstreaming is a strategy used to assess the implications of government policies, government actions, and government programs on both men and women in national and international spheres. So it is a systematic approach that is used to identify the gender-specific barriers that confront female traders, female entrepreneurs, female wage workers in agriculture, in manufacturing, in other service-related areas, which includes tourism. So the advantages of mainstreaming gender provisions in an agreement establishing an FTA, and more specifically within this context, we're talking about the CAFTA agreement. The first advantage is that mainstreaming gender provisions in an FTA agreement is that it contributes to the redress of the systemic gender-based discrimination. For example, whereas trade liberalization can provide new employment opportunities in a market economy, on the flip side, increased market access opportunities may be difficult for women, especially given that in most African societies, you find that most women lack property rights and even may not be in a position to access several factors of production, and that includes credit, and could be as much as technology and other things like market expertise. So increased participation of women in a market economy such as that of African Continental Free Trade Area could be an impetus for the achievement of decent work, which leads to the achievement of SDG 8 and industrialization SDG 9, and we talk about reduced inequalities SDG 10. So indeed, clearly we see that gender mainstreaming is indeed something that could increase, has several benefits that are more advantageous to the society as a whole. And again, through gender mainstreaming, policies are able to respond effectively to the needs of the majority of the citizens, and that includes men, women, boys, and girls, and not just as secluded spouses, which is the men only, as it used to be in the past. So how has the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area, the agreement establishing the CAFTA, fared on? So the CAFTA agreement acknowledges that that the regional economic communities are the founding blocks of the FTA. And therefore, from a gender perspective, we have 5 regional economic communities, and that includes COMESA, EAC, ECAS, ECOWAS, and SADC, that cumulatively have about 20 gender-related provisions. However, if you look at the CAFTA agreement, it generally has two provisions that relate to gender, and that includes its preamble, and which acknowledges the role of women and gender equality, and the other provision is Article 3E, which forms part of its objectives of the agreement, and that also acknowledges that the gender equality is one of the objectives of the CAFTA agreement. So we find that looking at the preamble itself, it is not a legally binding provision, and therefore little can be done to actually encourage the member states to try to ensure that they achieve gender equality within the continent. And then, given that the language of Article 3E in relation to gender equality is also couched in a manner that is aspirational, such that whether or not it is going to be achieved is a whole topic and debate altogether. And however, looking at the protocols to this agreement, there is some hope, because you find that Article 4 of the Protocol on Trade and Services addresses the need to improve women's export capacity. And if you look again at, that is Article 27. And then Article 4 of the Protocol on Free Movement of Persons within the continent, you find that it prohibits the discrimination of people or anyone within the continent based on sex. So you find that these provisions, much as they're legally binding on the member states, they're not really the language used to couch this provision. They're still quite ambiguous and can be interpreted in a manner that could likely not end up achieving the goal or the aim that it aims to achieve. So how best can the CAFTA agreement try to ensure that gender equality is actually achieved within the continent and within the free trade area? So I've identified several factors, several issues, several ways in which gender provisions could actually be mainstreamed within the agreement itself to ensure that gender equality is achieved. And one, we could look at research. The agreement could try to incorporate provisions related to research and gender impact assessment, so that it includes the pre and post impact assessment of particular policies, so that in that way you're able to assess how much have these programs affected women, how much have these programs promoted women's participation in a particular market economy. That would be very helpful. Secondly, you could also look at gender-focused exceptions, just like the WTO GATT Article 20 that provides for several exceptions. Gender could also be part of those. Exceptions. Thirdly, we could look at including a provision that encourages businesses to use corporate social responsibility to address issues such as labor, such as wages, such as gender equality. And with this, we're borrowing from the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, so that with this, it means that more women are actually able to participate in high decision-making positions within companies, within the government. And this has the potential to increase the number of women participating in high decision-making places. Another thing we could consider, the CAFTA could consider incorporating another provision, or rather establishing agenda monitoring committee. And this I borrowed from the Canada, Chile, and Chile Uruguay FTA. So this could establishing agenda monitoring committee, which implements the gender-focused provisions and trade implications, and also looks at how the provisions within the CAFTA agreement are being implemented in relation to gender, are being implemented. This actually has an impact, because this committee could also look at could also be actively involved in the gender impact assessment. So this actually ensures that women, that the policies, the actions, the programs that are aimed to ensure that women participate more in these market economies, then actually end up being of benefit, that the policy and the reality, there's no that disconnect between them, so that both the policy achieves its actual the policy and the reality on the ground actually are at par, and that ends up being of benefit to women. So the challenges that could actually result from this particular mainstreaming gender provisions within the CAFTA agreement, there are quite several, but for now I'll restrict myself to lack of awareness and the financial implications. Right now, the African Union may not be having all those finances to cater for some of these programs or plans that may need to be implemented as proposed. But if it could channel in terms of priority some of these finances to include so that it allows some of these finances to go towards actually ensuring that women and girls participate more in the market economy. It has the benefit of increasing the living standard of people within the African continent, and that means with a population that has higher standards of living, that is of benefit to the African Union itself. And another on lack of awareness, the African Union could come in more strongly to advocate, to create policies, to encourage member states to create policies that actually and to create policies that aim to create awareness to the people from the grassroots level. So this would be a more bottom-up approach to gender awareness. So this would, I believe, this would actually be instrumental. So, in conclusion, the CAFTA agreement really, we can't say that it is doing so bad, because in comparison to most of these other free trade agreements, the CAFTA is actually doing quite well. However, it can still do better. But then, for it to do better would require more political goodwill from the member states to ensure that they implement the provisions that currently exist, and also they're also in a position to be more agreeable to the potential positive benefits of incorporating more gender-related provisions within the agreement. And with this, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to Gareth and Dr. Nee for coming up with this program, and also for making it possible for me to be part of this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Akini Aurelia, as well as Mune Mafusire, for your inputs and for your work. And to take a closer look at Akini's paper, canadaafrica.ca, the information is there, or do feel free to email us. Well, our final speaker today is a leading voice not only in Canada, but also across the world. Fred McMahon is Director for Economic Freedom, the annual Economic Freedom of the World Index produced by the Fraser Institute. And if I'm not mistaken, just ranked the most influential think tank in Canada by one of the major universities that track this exclusively, the University of Pennsylvania. Fred, it's an absolute honor to welcome you. It would be an understatement if I said you were one of the most popular speakers at the Chamber. It is great to have you back. And following Fred's remarks, we will then go into a question and answer session as part of networking, taking us through to 12 o'clock. Fred McMahon, the floor is yours.
Well, first off, I'd like to really compliment Gareth and the Canadian African Chamber. This is the third or fourth one that I've participated in, and the seventh or eighth one that I've listened to. These, Gareth, are just exceptional internet seminars, extremely useful, and the people you collect to speak at them are really incredible, as everyone can see today from the quality of the presentations. I'm just going to take a look at the importance of trade for Africa in a global sense. Africa and the Arab world have the lowest level of intra-regional trade of any region in the world. Now, Africa has improved from 10% of its trade volume in 1995, 10% being interregional trade, to 17% now. The Arab world has moved, and that's better than the Arab world, which is only around 10% of its trade being interregional trade. By the way, I need to say a quick comment about data and the numbers that I'll use. There are any number of ways to calculate these things. So you may have heard different numbers than the one I present, but they should be, but they are effective estimates. As I say, you'll get different results depending on different definitions, but these will be within a narrow estimate range of the various calculations. So the Arab world is 10% interregional trade. Africa is 17% interregional trade. Now that might seem quite good for Africa, at least in comparison with the Arab world, which is in the cellar for interregional trade, but not when you look at the overall numbers. Trade for Africa represents 25% of GDP. For the Arab world, it represents over 40% of GDP. So in both places, about the same percent of GDP is involved in intra-regional trade. It is profoundly important to emphasize the centrality of intra-regional trade. China, the United States, the European Union all have very flawed economic policies, particularly China. But they can thrive because they have this huge, more or less domestic market. I say domestic market for Europe because nearly 70% of European trade is with other European countries. So creating Africa as the world's largest free trade zone would be an immense boost, as a number of speakers have said, to the African economy. But sadly, it's not just a trade agreement that's needed. A reform of regulatory structures across Africa is going to be necessary to actually make the free trade agreement a reality. So for instance, to clear customs, fill out all the paperwork and so on, in Africa takes over 70 hours. Same thing for the Arab world, over 70 hours. For Europe, it's 2.1 hours. So you can see the amount of sand in the gears for Africa, for intra-Africa trade, even with a free trade agreement. To clear, the cost of clearing customs is in Africa about $550 compared to $107 in Europe. So if you're good, so if the free trade agreement is going to be effective, barriers outside the free trade agreement within Africa have to be lowered, or it will become a free trade agreement without free trade because it's just too expensive. Now, free trade, all the econometric tests, all the econometric studies show that free trade is actually the single most important factor in reducing poverty. So this is a pro-poverty reduction program. Now, that same thing does not apply to inequality. While free trade dramatically reduces poverty at any level, whether severe or moderate, well, free trade does that. It doesn't do much for inequality. People like myself used to say, oh, well, look, the important thing is reducing poverty. And if inequality doesn't decline, well, that's too bad. We'd like to see it decline, but the key thing is reducing poverty. Unfortunately, what that doesn't recognize is that human beings are human beings. And concern about how others are doing, or raw jealousy, is simply part of our nature. And where trade has developed, even where poverty has been massively reduced, if inequality rises, you get a backlash against free trade. In other words, it becomes an unstable policy. Peru has benefited hugely from free market policies and free trade. Poverty has declined dramatically, and yet they've just elected a president who deeply opposes free markets and free trade. And that's because it didn't address the inequality question. Now, I don't have an absolute solution for how you develop trade and other free market policies and reduce inequality at the same time. By the way, inequality is about the same in free market economies and non-free market economies, but free market economies tend to have a lot less suppression. So the objections to inequality become stronger, and because they are free economies, which typically go with democracy, it's easier to reverse course. But I will tell you one thing that would go a long, long way to combating inequality. And that is simply dealing with corruption and dealing with the kind of unofficial trade barriers I've just mentioned. If powerful people can get control over aspects of trade through corruption, they can cut competitors out, charge larger fees at the border, demand payments, the whole realm of things that is truly destructive, both economically and socially. So if Africa could move to deal with those huge costs in wait time, huge costs in getting packages across the border. By the way, I could go through any number of statistics that show that sort of problem in a number of areas related to trade. If you could do that, you could make this marvelous initiative of a free trade area become a reality rather than an image off in the distance behind trade barriers. And you could help deal with some of the inequality, and frankly, the worst inequality, because inequality due to corruption and inefficiency hurts everyone. If it's inequality because you figured out a way to make a better product at a cheaper price and therefore thrive, people become better off. Now, that doesn't resolve the human nature feeling towards inequality, but at least it means that everybody benefits economically. When inequality is created by corruption and theft, everyone is worse off except for the thief. So I'd like to simply close by once again complimenting Gareth and the Chamber for putting on an absolutely exceptional series of webinars, and also compliment the leaders in Africa and all the panelists for this extremely important initiative, which could have profound and positive economic effects for Africa, create great poverty reduction as it has elsewhere. And I'm glad to see that other issues like inequality, like women's status and fairness are being tackled by the panelists, because hopefully this will come as one beneficial package. So again, Gareth, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Fred. So Gareth is on just arranging for the next stage of the event. I want to say a big thank you to Fred McMahon, and also to all our speakers, to your excellencies, and to all the other speakers we've had, Professor Lebeau, my boss over at McGill, and to all the speakers, our McGill alumni speakers, Your Excellency, actually, let me just go back and say Your Excellency Chantal, to Your Excellency also Viviane Bampassi, particularly, I think for your support in actually putting this event together with the Chamber. What we are going to be doing now is also getting the chance to go back and discuss some of the questions and that have come up as we're speaking. There are a number of questions that have been put in the Q&A box. We know that there are some of you who also have questions that you might want to ask live. So what I'll just say is that if you're interested in asking a question live, please stay where you are and just indicate so. Maybe you can just indicate so, and Gareth would should actually turn on your video. What we want to be doing is that you turn on your video and you'll get the chance to actually ask the questions that you might want to pose as well, right? It is clear to me anyway. The time has gone by very quickly. We would have loved to have more time to go in more depth with the various speakers. There are multiple issues that have been raised, right? And as has been said initially, this is just the beginning. We're looking at how can we actually look at some of these issues more long-term. Multiple challenges, but also multiple opportunities.